Oh, hello. I just recorded my Mary Shelley May announcement. Very excited to be doing Mary Shelley May again this year. And I thought since I was here, I might as well go ahead and do my good news for the month of March. So if you are new here and you've never watched one of these videos before, this year I am doing a series to kind of hold myself accountable to keeping a really good grasp on my commonplace books. So I really wanted to focus on some good news this year. I think we could all use quite a bit of good news this year. The books that I am reading are full of good things. And so I am focusing on some themes. I have a commonplace book. They're nothing fancy, but they are full of pages of wisdom. And so taken from the things that I'm reading each month. So I have one that focuses on faith, beauty, love, nature, and other. And what I do is when I read something that I want to remember, that strikes me, that feels important, that feels like something I really want to ponder, I pick up the right notebook. I decide where it goes. I pick up the right notebook and I literally physically write it in my notebook. And I just have pages and pages and pages of good news from this year. So let's see what I have gathered from the month of March in 2025. I have first picked up nature, and we've got quite a few. So let's see. So from This Ordinary Stardust by Alan Townsend, it says, our life choices similarly write lasting change within our bodies. Choosing hope over fear results in distinctly different chemical cascades within. If we can remain hopeful in the face of life's chaos, our bodies are bathed in hormones that both settle and invigorate us. Slip into fear and stress, and a different cocktail goes on the attack. Remarkably, trauma and our reactions to it affect not just our own health, but can alter the gene expression and hence the bodies of our descendants too. Our choices really do have lasting consequences. That isn't belief, that is scientific fact. Also from This Ordinary Stardust by Alan Townsend. Among its lessons, science shows us that we live in a world that can't handle unchecked growth. Ever. Our bodies aren't meant to handle it, our planet isn't meant to handle it, and our civilization can't sustain it, whether we're talking about the economy, development, or anything else. Surprise, surprise. Also, This Ordinary Stardust by Alan Townsend. The trees in these forests are astonishingly varied. At least 700 different species live here. One vaguely resembles an oak, yet drops a carpet of yellow flowers each year that makes the entire area smell like garlic. A few others swell grotesquely at their base, as though stricken with some form of arboreal gout. Still more are covered in reptilian armor, earning them the name alligator tree, while another, the cow tree, exudes a milky sap from its dappled trunk that locals swear will cure all manner of ills. Among my favorites is the zapatero, Spanish for shoemaker, whose giant yellow roots wind along the forest floor and whose trunk will break just about any chainsaw. One thing unites all of these trees and all the others on our planet. They live life where it is and as it comes. Surprisingly also from This Ordinary Stardust by Alan Townsend. Oobleck is a non-Newtonian fluid, and that means it doesn't follow Isaac's simple rules for how we think the world should work. Treat it gently, and it will flow like water. Smack it around, and it hardens into a solid. The elements within run for each other under pressure as though mobilizing into some unseen defense strategy, suddenly creating a wall to the outside world. And in that, Oobleck, like the caterpillar, has something to teach us about ourselves. for it has the plasticity of the human mind and many of the same limits. We don't do well as scientists or as human beings when we allow stress and fear to stand in our way. There's physics behind this, the very same physics that produced the sound waves in Neva's purple bowl. From Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. Actually, it's from the epilogue, which is written by his wife. Often I return to the grave after leaving flowers, tulips, lilies, carnations, to find the heads eaten by deer. It's just as good a use for the flowers as any, and one Paul would have liked. The earth is quickly turned over by worms, the processes of nature marching on, reminding me of what Paul saw and what I now carry deep in my bones too. The inextricability of life and death, and the ability to cope, to find meaning despite this, because of this. From Gone Away Lake by Elizabeth Enright. They walked up the slope into the woods and kept walking up. It was a wonderful day. The leaves rustled softly and endlessly in the wind. Everything was moving in the woods, all the leaves and all the twigs and all the birds, and the sunshine was sliding and jumping in patches over the ground. Also from Gone Away Lake. Time gets into anything. Yes, indeed it does, and weather helps it. And then the Boston ivy that was planted 60 years ago has crawled all over the house till it looks as if it had been knitted into a huge afghan. Owls live in the porch. I don't like the place. Also from Gone Away Lake. The world looked washed the next day. It was washed. Every leaf glittered. The peonies shed their feathers in the storm, but the roses were at their best. And the last one for nature from Gone Away Lake. The nights were cold and still. Great lights roved over the north, and the stars shivered. In the mornings, there was a nap of hoarfrost on the grass, but by the time they reached Gone Away, it had melted, except in the shady spots. All the reeds were glittering, and the foxtail grasses were full of rainbow sparks. So some great nature reading this month. Surprisingly, our first one comes from This Ordinary Stardust by Alan Townsend. This is going to be a theme for all of the themes. So, near the end of the trail Diana and I first ran together in Costa Rica, there is a tree that has no business being where it is. It clings stubbornly to an outcrop of lava that gets clobbered by the sea, wave after wave smashing the rocks and coating the little tree in salt. You might be picturing it as some noble bonsai against this wild background, but in truth, it's a homely little thing that still manages to claw out a living against the odds. It's gnarled and misshapen and vaguely reminiscent of Gollum. Its ugliness is all the more striking because of the breathtaking grandeur of the forests nearby. But I love the thing. I think about it often. It's funny and unexpected and inspiring all at once, and it reminds me that we are capable of finding footholds in life that we don't believe are possible. From The Ordinary Princess by M.M.K. The evening sunlight was throwing long shafts of gold between the mossy tree trunks of the forest, and all around them birds were singing in the green thickets. From Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen. The sky over Abergavenny was a pale romantic blue. Winter had lost its teeth. It was warm for mid-March, and honey-sweet blossoms drifted on the breeze. The main street was lined with low pastel buildings, the dramatic hill towering behind them in great arches of forest and grassland. There was an old-fashioned cafe with wicker chairs on the pavement, a bakery that smelled of strawberry tarts, and a barber shop buzzing with the sound of clippers. From Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen. Over the congealing trenches of the Western Front, there was a sunset of peach and pink and purple smudged across a canvas of gold. It never failed to amaze me, even after all these centuries, that the elements cared not for human pain, that the sky and its stars paid no heed to the obliterated corpses below, that the birds still sang each morning, no matter how many men had fallen the night before. Faith. Let's see what we have for faith this month. Can you guess? Why, yes, it is This Ordinary Stardust by Alan Townsend. Science becomes its whole self in both discovery and within us when we don't try to deify it or demand perfection to give it our trust, when instead we view it as akin to the way most religions frame us humans, basically messy, hopefully striving every day to improve, and still capable of astonishing miracles. When breath becomes air. Maybe in the absence of any certainty, we should just assume that we're going to live a long time. Maybe that's the only way forward. From when breath becomes air. When you come to one of the many moments in life where you must give an account of yourself, provide a ledger of what you have been and done and meant to the world, do not, I pray, discount that you filled a dying man's days with a sated joy. A joy unknown to me in all my prior years, a joy that does not hunger for more and more, but rests satisfied in this time right now. That is an enormous thing. Our Infinite Fates by Laura Steves. No, I think it's just Laura Steve. I added an S. I think it's just Steve. The cover is here. You can see. And so, in the absence of any abiding religious convictions, this was the one blind faith I had, that love was a physical force, and it was never wasted. Once it was called out into the universe, it would echo back to us forever. And the last one for faith comes from Our Infinite Fates. It hadn't worked, and I could barely believe it. That was the great peril of living in perpetual hope, of letting unbridled optimism inform your every move. When things didn't work out the way you hoped, the way you believed they would, there was also the genuine shock to contend with, a subtle rearranging of your worldview, unwanted evidence against the faith that you held so dear. It hadn't worked. That ever-burning candle of hope in my chest, the one Arden had remembered upon the blood-soaked trenches of the Great War, sputtered, but it did not extinguish. Not yet. Love. How much do you want to bet that the first one is going to be from This Ordinary Stardust? It is. All right, could I do this? Could I somehow prepare for the near inevitability of a life without her, for the unspeakable devastation of watching her die, while simultaneously pouring every possible ounce of hope and belief into a narrative where her singularity extended even to this? I didn't know. This Ordinary Stardust. Ourselves are inextricably, repeatedly, wondrously connected to that world. I find comfort in our inevitable disintegration and sometimes think of us as a seed source of nearly infinite potential, because my atoms and yours and everyone else's will go on to play a part in every story the world has yet to write. That, for me, is the permanence of our love. Go back and listen to that one again, because, wow. This Ordinary Stardust. I remember looking back at her in wonder and thinking about how many times I had watched her lift someone else up, how it came to her as easily as drawing a breath. And as the years have passed since, I've come to believe that living and dying as she did are not impossible, are not reserved for the almost mythically strong among us. Because in truth, while she will always be deified in my own mind for what she brought to my life, she was just a person like any of the rest of us, but perhaps differentiated in her ability to use one of humanity's most wondrous constructs, science, as a path to developing her extraordinary soul. When breath becomes air. As a resident, my highest ideal was not saving lives. Everyone dies eventually. But guiding a patient or family to an understanding of death or illness. When a patient comes in with a fatal head bleed, that first conversation with a neurosurgeon may forever color how the family remembers death. From a peaceful letting go to an open sore regret, where there's no place for the scalpel, words are the surgeon's only tool. From the epilogue by his wife in Breath Becomes Air. I expected to feel only empty and heartbroken after Paul died. It never occurred to me that you could love someone the same way after he was gone, that I would continue to feel such love and gratitude alongside the terrible sorrow, the grief so heavy that at times I shiver and moan under the weight of it. My love goes on, lives on, in a way I would never have expected. Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen. Like the sway of the sea and the tug of the tides, love is a moving, eternal thing. Let us not be afraid of the wax and the wane, the rise and the fall, the eternal undertow. Each time our souls meet, let us submerge our bodies in the bright blue cold and let the waves make us new. I love you, and I have loved you, and I will love you. Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen. There was never enough time. How do you always find me? I whispered, my forehead pressed against her shoulder blade, my arms tightening around her waist like she was a buoy in the sea. After several moments of contemplation, she murmured, "There's like a tether or something. It thrums between us, draws me to you like a magnet, and until it finds you, it's like always being hungry. It gnaws at me. Don't you feel it too? I do, but it doesn't point me to you like a compass. It's more like a deep yearning, only it doesn't ease when we're together, it intensifies." Was that how all humans experienced love? I would never know. Our Infinite Fates by Laura Steve. You can really tell what I thought was quotable this month. Even when our families grieved and moved on, even when our ancestors lay in the dirt, even when we slipped through the cracks of time like ghosts, there would always be us. No matter how twisted and broken we were, the one true constant, our love, like a river, winding its way through the earth year after year, century after century, growing deeper and wider with every twist and bend. A certain peace came with knowing the water would always flow a particular way. Our Infinite Fates. The cruelest fate the gods and stars had ever written. The person I loved most in the world was the person who would ultimately destroy me. Our Infinite Fates. An eternity sprawled out between them, acres and acres of emotion and hope and grief, a face so powerful it stole the breath from Leon's lungs, almost made him bend double at the waist, or burst into a lifetime of unshed tears, or something. Excuse me, have we met before? From Caddy Woodlawn. Suddenly she burst into tears and flung herself into Mr. Woodlawn's arms. "Hattie, Hattie, my little Harriet," cried Father, holding her close and kissing her. The children stood around with gaping eyes and mouths. Stranger even than the inheritance from England it was to see, stranger even than the inheritance from England it was to see Mother crying and Father kissing her. And from Caddy Woodlawn by Carol Ryrie Brink. Still another traveler had been on his way for months now. He had no steamboat tickets. He could not ask nor understand directions. He only knew that his nose and his heart were keeping him headed in the right direction. He was footsore and muddy and full of burrs. Sometimes he was hungry and heartsick and filled with despair, but he knew that he must get home. Sometimes he begged rides on boats similar to the boat which had carried him away. Sometimes people fed him and he licked their hands, but he would never stay. Sometimes he caught rabbits or birds for his food and trotted through the tangled wilderness, lying at night beneath the stars to lick his weary feet and sleep. One day he trotted into the farmyard, so thin, so dirty, so footsore and covered with burrs, but Caddy Woodlawn knew him. Love. And finally, we have other, which is traditionally the one that it's the catch-all, so it gets the most quotes. Let's see what we have in other. Oh yeah, quite a few. I don't know if I'll read them all, but let's see. It's not, the first one is not from This Ordinary Stardust. That's the first time. Okay, this is from Christina's Ghost by Betty Rinwright. Bringing sunshine into another person's life was tricky enough without that person knowing what you were up to. Then we have This Ordinary Stardust. The story doesn't always progress in the ways you envision. Like the butterfly, science teaches you to expect repeated dissolutions of the narrative you think you're in, and hopefully the ability to adjust to the one that now is. Sometimes you never get out of the muck, but every once in a while, a remarkable new reality emerges that you could never predict. Also by Alan Townsend in This Ordinary Stardust. Like the butterfly, science teaches you that a moment of contraction and chaos, a time when everything seems to be falling apart, is probably temporary, that something surprising and wonderful might lie ahead. Also from This Ordinary Stardust by Alan Townsend. When our scientific predictions are right, it feels good, but we're not always right, and there are some things that are extremely difficult to predict. Even with mountains of data, this is a paradox of scientific endeavor. We must embrace life's fundamental uncertainty while simultaneously living in a body and world that so wants certitude. And sometimes we can't help but hope for something that defies all the data that allows us to make predictions in the first place. From When Breath Becomes Air. I had come to see language as an almost supernatural force, existing between people, bringing our brains, shielded in centimeter-thick skulls, into communion. A word meant something only between people, and life's meaning, its virtue, had something to do with the depth of the relationships we form. It was the relational aspect of humans that undergirded meaning. Yet somehow, this process existed in brains and bodies subject to their own physiologic imperatives, prone to breaking and failing. There must be a way, I thought, that the language of life as experienced, of passion, of hunger, of love, bore some relationship, however, convoluted to the language of neurons, digestive tracts, and heartbeats. Also from When Breath Becomes Air. Drowning, even in blood, one adapts, learns to float, to swim, even to enjoy life, bonding with the nurses, doctors, and others who are clinging to the same raft, caught in the same tide. Our Infinite Fates by Laura Steeves. Never again. How could anyone bear the weight of never? I suppose most nevers were not as long as mine. From When Breath Becomes Air. The physician's duty is not to stave off death or return patients to their old lives, but to take into our arms a patient and family whose lives have disintegrated and work until they can stand back up and face and make sense of their own existence. From Our Infinite Fates. You're very brave. I hope you know that. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. It's impossible to have bravery without fear. Bravery is picking up the fear and carrying it alongside you, rather than allowing it to block your path. From Our Infinite Fates. I could keep tabs on her from a distance in my next life. Technology had made it much easier to watch someone lovingly from afar. The thought was both laughingly mundane and profoundly comforting. The absolute absurdity of modern connections, a spider's web with so many strands you couldn't quite see the real world through them. The internet was a Russian doll Gifts tucked inside curses, tucked inside gifts. No way of knowing which formed its core. The Windaby Puzzle by Lois Lowry. Each of us has a story. I do, you do, my mailman does, so does the frail elderly neighbor, the woman who waits on me at the supermarket, and the boy who just rode past me on a bicycle. Our stories each have a beginning, middle, and eventually an end. We have adventures along the way. We have moments of anger and despair, times we are bored and distracted, spells of quiet contentment, and other times when we are overwhelmed by joy. We live our stories in various locations. Some of us perhaps end where we start, without ever having explored other realms. Others find it hard to stay put. The Windaby Puzzle by Lois Lowry. Part of me is a storyteller. I like to pry open doors and peer into corners and figure out all the whys that make people who they are. Me too, Lois. The Unseen Guest by Mary Rose Wood. If you have ever sniffed at the spout of a carton of milk to judge whether the contents were drinkable and found yourself wondering if milk actually goes from fresh to sour all at once in a great curdling swoop, or whether it turns bit by bit in little souring steps, and if so, at what point along the way the sourness would become evident to the human nose, and whether it might not be wiser to have a glass of lemonade instead, then you will have some idea of Penelope's current predicament. By now she understood that the mood in the nursery had begun to curdle. Also from The Unseen Guest. For, as Agatha Swanborn once said, it is easier to change one's boots than to change one's mind, but it is far easier to change one's mind about whether or not to wear boots than it is to change the weather. Go back and listen to that one again, too. I love that one. Also from The Unseen Guest by Mary Rose Wood. Bells, 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 bells. Mr. Edgar Allan Poe once wrote a poem that contained this line and many more like it, for the poem is all about the jingling and tingling, swinging and ringing, tolling, chiming, sobbing, and sighing of the bells. This poem, which is called, unsurprisingly, The Bells, would have perfectly described the noisy tintintabulation that ensued when the widow Astor hit the ground, for all the gentlemen simultaneously ran to help. From Caddy Woodlawn by Carol Ryrie Brink. Something like sadness filled her young heart. The pigeons, like the Indians, were fighting a losing battle with the white man. From Caddy Woodlawn by Carol Ryrie Brink. Mother, what are we going to have in our bread tonight? Sometimes Mrs. Woodlawn said brown sugar or jelly, but usually the answer was cold turkey. Dear, oh that. There's nothing nicer than turkey on bread, my child. Think of all the poor children who would be glad of a nice turkey sandwich. Tom and Caddy and Warren had often thought of these poor children who had no turkey. Secretly, they envied them. From Caddy Woodlawn. Teacher said that President Lincoln had his birthday in February too, and Caddy wished more than ever that she had been born a boy. Perhaps she could have grown up to be president then, but now she would have to leave that to Tom or Warren. Also from Caddy Woodlawn. What a lot has happened since last year, when I dropped nuts all over the dining room floor. How far I've come. I'm the same girl, and yet not the same. I wonder if it's always like that. Folks keep growing from one person into another all their lives, and life is just a lot of everyday adventures. Well, whatever life is, I like it. And Gone Away Lake, our final bit of good news is from Gone Away Lake by Elizabeth Enright. Come on, Portia, let's go see who lives there and ask them who they are. Oh, I don't know. Do you think we'd better? Sure, it'll be all right. Would bad people keep a duck? Would they have a rose bush? Would bad people keep a duck? That's it. That's the good news that I recorded in my commonplace book over the course of the month of March. Some real gems in there. And if you couldn't tell, the quotable books of the hour were definitely This Ordinary Stardust, When Breath Becomes Air, and Our Infinite Fates. 3 of my favorite reads of the month, maybe of the year so far. Who's to say? It's a little bit early. But there is the good news. I wish you all good things over the course of your April reading and living. And until we meet again, let's go read.